Tonight, somewhere in the world, a baby will be born in a room filled with machines. A monitor will trace a heartbeat. A nurse will check oxygen. A doctor will be standing nearby in case anything goes wrong. And to you, that probably sounds normal. But for almost every baby who ever lived, none of that existed. No hospital, no ultrasound, no antibiotics, no incubator, no blood transfusion, no emergency surgery waiting behind a swinging door. There was a small room, a fire maybe, a basin of water, a few cloths, and a group of people who knew that one of the most ordinary things a human body can do is also one of the most dangerous. So how did babies survive before hospitals existed? The answer is not that birth used to be easy. It was not. The answer is that humans built an entire survival system around the fact that it could go wrong at any moment. And that system was older than medicine, older than written language, and in some ways, more communal than anything most of us experience today. There is a biological reason this was never simple. Human birth is unusually demanding, but not for one neat, single reason. It is the product of a very complicated evolutionary bargain. A baby with a large, rapidly developing brain, a mother's anatomy, the mechanics of movement, energy demands during pregnancy, and a birth canal that requires a baby to make a sequence of rotations as it travels out. Modern researchers still argue over exactly which pressures mattered most. But on the basic point, there is no mystery. Human childbirth has always carried real risk. That means early communities could not treat labor as something one person should simply endure in silence. They developed knowledge around it. Women gave birth upright, crouching, kneeling, supported by another person, or seated on low stools. Those positions were not quaint traditions. They could use gravity, create room for movement, and let an attendant see what was happening. In a world with no fetal monitors, the body itself was the monitor. Its sounds, its timing, its exhaustion, its changes in breathing. All of it was information. Because before hospitals saved babies, people saved babies. Start with the thing that modern life makes easy to forget. Birth was never a private event. For most of human history, a woman in labor was surrounded by other women, mothers, sisters, grandmothers, neighbors, experienced midwives. In some societies, men were deliberately kept outside. Not because birth was unimportant, because it was too important to be treated casually. A birth attendant did not have a medical degree, but she often had something almost as valuable in a world without formal medicine: pattern recognition. She had seen dozens, sometimes hundreds, of births. She knew what normal labor sounded like. She knew when a mother was becoming exhausted. She knew which position could make a delivery easier. She knew when the baby was not coming. And she knew, sometimes, when there was nothing anyone could do. That last part is hard to sit with. We like to imagine the past as a simpler version of the present. Same people, fewer gadgets. But childbirth is one place where that idea collapses completely. In the past, a healthy pregnancy could become a life or death emergency in a few hours. A breech baby, a cord wrapped around the baby, a placenta that would not detach, bleeding that would not stop, an infection that arrived after the delivery seemed finished. Today, those problems have names: protocols, blood products, surgical teams, neonatal units. For most of history, they had prayers, and still, people kept having children. Not because they did not understand danger. Ancient people understood death better than modern people do. They saw it closely. They saw women die in childbirth. They saw newborns fail to breathe. They saw infections turn from fever to funeral in days. Birth was not a pastel-colored announcement. It was an event everyone respected because everyone knew what was at stake. And that knowledge changed the way babies were cared for from the first second. The moment a baby emerged, the first question was not, "What should we name them?" It was much simpler. Are they breathing? Before oxygen tanks and neonatal resuscitation, people relied on touch, warmth, rubbing, clearing the mouth and nose, and instinctive stimulation. A baby who was limp might be rubbed with cloth, held close to heat, or gently moved to provoke a breath. Some practices were useful, some were dangerous, some were based on centuries of observation. Some were based on hope, but they all came from the same brutal fact. A newborn has very little time. And then came the next problem: keeping that baby alive long enough to become a child. This is where the story gets stranger, because the most important technology in human infant survival was not a hospital. It was the human body. Breastfeeding. For most of our species' history, breast milk was food, water, immune support, temperature regulation, and emergency medicine rolled into one. A newborn did not need a bottle sterilized in boiling water. There was no bottle. There was no safe powdered formula. There was no refrigerator. There was a mother. Or, if the mother could not nurse, another lactating woman. That practice was called wet nursing, and it existed in cultures across the world for thousands of years. Sometimes it was a paid job. Sometimes it was family. Sometimes it was a desperate act of mutual survival. A woman with milk could keep another woman's baby alive. In a world where an infant's mother might die in childbirth, become seriously ill, or simply be unable to produce enough milk, that could be the difference between life and death. Think about how extraordinary that is. Your survival, in the first fragile months of life, may once have depended not on an institution, not on a device, but on whether another person in your community had enough milk and was willing to share it. That is not sentimental. It is logistics. Human babies are unusually helpless. A foal can stand within hours. A baby giraffe is already trying to walk. A human newborn cannot even hold up its own head. Compared with other mammals, we arrive early. Our brains are still growing at a ridiculous rate. Our bodies cannot regulate heat very well. We cannot feed ourselves. We cannot move away from danger. So humans adapted by doing something no other animal does on the same scale. We made infancy everyone's problem. Anthropologists call this alloparenting, care provided by people other than the mother. Older siblings carried babies. Grandmothers watched them. Aunts gathered food. Fathers protected the group. Children just old enough to be useful began helping with younger children. The baby was not raised by two exhausted adults alone in an apartment. The baby was raised in the middle of a network. There was another strategy, less dramatic but just as important: spacing births. In many foraging societies, long periods of breastfeeding could delay the return of fertility, naturally widening the time between pregnancies. That did not make pregnancy safe, but it could give a mother more time to recover, and it gave one child more time to become less physically dependent before another baby arrived. It is one reason infancy was not a single event. It was a long, shared project that shaped the rhythm of the whole group. And this was not just help in the modern casual sense. It was a division of labor. Someone had to find food. Someone had to keep the fire alive. Someone had to carry water. Someone had to hold an older child while the mother fed the newborn. Infant survival was not a private achievement. It was a group economy. And that network mattered because babies did not just face danger at birth. They faced it every day after: cold, hunger, dehydration, diarrheal disease, respiratory infections, parasites, accidents. In many places, the most dangerous part of life was not old age. It was being under 1 year old. Historical records from industrializing America make this painfully clear. Around 1915, roughly 1 out of every 10 U.S. babies died before reaching their first birthday. That is not ancient Rome. That is the lifetime of your great-grandparents' grandparents. A nation with cities, newspapers, railroads, factories, and electric lights still lost babies at a rate that would feel almost unimaginable now. And the reason was not one single disease. It was everything: contaminated water, unpasteurized milk, crowded housing, malnutrition, measles, whooping cough, pneumonia, summer heat. A small infection that modern antibiotics would treat in days could become fatal. A dirty feeding bottle could carry bacteria directly into the body of a baby with almost no defenses. This is why the history of baby survival is not just a story about hospitals. It is a story about plumbing. It is a story about clean water, sewage systems, soap, food safety, vaccination, antibiotics, and people learning, slowly and painfully, that invisible things could kill you. For a very long time, nobody knew that. Imagine being a parent in 1800. Your baby develops a fever. You do not know about viruses. You do not know about bacteria. You do not know why one child in the neighborhood gets sick and another does not. You might believe the illness came from bad air, a curse, an imbalance in the body, a punishment, a change in weather. And, to be fair, you would be trying to explain a real disaster with the only tools your world had given you. The terrifying part is that early hospitals were not automatically safer. In the 19th century, before germ theory was understood, some maternity wards became places of catastrophe. Doctors and medical students could move from dissecting corpses to examining women in labor without washing their hands properly. Women developed puerperal fever, an infection after childbirth that could spread through a ward like a fire. In 1847, a Hungarian doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis noticed something horrifying in Vienna. One maternity clinic, staffed by doctors and students, had far more maternal deaths than another clinic staffed by midwives. He ordered hand washing with a chlorine solution. Deaths dropped dramatically. That discovery should have changed medicine immediately. It did not. Many doctors resisted the idea that their own hands could be carrying death. Semmelweis was mocked, ignored, and eventually broken by the fight. But the point is this: a hospital is not magic. A building does not save you. Knowledge saves you. Clean hands save you. A trained person who recognizes a complication and has somewhere to send you saves you. Before that knowledge existed, the safest place to give birth was not always the newest building. Sometimes it was home, with a midwife who understood her limits and a family who could act fast. But act fast had a terrible ceiling when there was nowhere to go. That is the difference modern obstetrics made. Not that it eliminated risk. It did not. Even now, pregnancy and childbirth can become dangerous very quickly. But modern care created answers to emergencies that used to have none. Blood for hemorrhage, antibiotics for infection, cesarean delivery for obstructed labor, incubators for premature babies, vaccines that prevent diseases which once tore through families. And those changes did not just save individual babies. They changed how people imagined the future. For most of history, parents loved their children fiercely. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Archaeology, letters, grave markers, and mourning rituals make that painfully obvious. But parents also lived with uncertainty that modern people struggle to imagine. A child could be healthy in the morning and gone by nightfall. You could give birth to 6 children and reach old age with only 3 beside you. That kind of world changes the emotional architecture of a family. People did not love less. They had to learn how to love with more fear. And yet, against all of that, babies survived. Not all of them. That is the honest part. Humanity did not glide smoothly through the past on the strength of maternal instinct and herbal remedies. Many children died. Many mothers died. Entire families were reshaped by losses that modern medicine now prevents every day. But enough survived because humans were never doing this alone. The person who warmed the water mattered. The grandmother who recognized a dangerous fever mattered. The older child who carried firewood mattered. The neighbor who shared milk mattered. The midwife who had delivered 50 babies mattered. The group that brought food to a mother too weak to gather it mattered. This was the original infant care system. Not perfect, not safe by modern standards, but deeply collective. And maybe that is the part of the story that should stay with you. When you picture a baby born before hospitals, do not picture a tiny person dropped into a cruel, empty world and somehow surviving by luck. Picture a circle of people leaning in. Picture hands, warmth, cloth, firelight, somebody listening for a first cry, somebody holding the mother upright, somebody running for help, somebody promising, without saying it, that this new life now belongs to all of them. Modern hospitals are one of humanity's greatest achievements. They have saved more mothers and babies than any story can fully hold. But they did not invent care. They made care more powerful. Long before the monitor beeped, long before the ambulance came, Long before anyone knew what a germ was, humans were already doing the one thing that gave helpless babies a chance. They gathered around them, and for thousands of years, that was enough to keep the story going.